Welcome to Thinking Green. I'm Rana, and I want to let everyone know that this show is being taped. It's not live, so you can't call in. But if you have any questions or comments or want to get involved, you can certainly get in touch with me, Rana at nlgreens.org, or put something on our Facebook page. Let us know that you're interested in getting involved, and we'll get any information to you that you want. So tonight's guest is Jennifer Siskind. She has been on the show before, and she is the local coordinator for Food and Water Watch, and she is one of many people in Connecticut who are working on banning fracking waste in our state. So welcome, Jen.
Thank you, Rhoda. Appreciate being here.
I guess the first question I want to ask you, and I know you have a slide presentation and you'll walk us through everything, but where does Connecticut stand right now in terms of the potential of fracking waste coming through?
Right now, we have a temporary moratorium that was passed 2 years ago, and it keeps all fracking waste from gas drilling wells, but not from oil wells, out of the state at the moment, unless there's a special permit that's been provided by Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, or DEEP, to conduct research on that type of waste to see if there's a way to treat it in a more prudent way. Yes.
And you say, and it's a temporary one as well,
correct? It is a temporary
correct?
moratorium because there, unfortunately, when the bill was first introduced to the legislature, the plan was to have a statewide ban. And there were numerous state representatives and senators that were supporting a statewide ban, but unfortunately the bill got compromised by the end of the legislative session in 2014. And the language that passed mandates that DEEP will submit regulations for review as early as next summer. They have a specific timeline when they have to submit these regulations, and it's July 1st of this coming summer to July 1st of next summer. And so far, Commissioner Klee has not supported a statewide ban in Connecticut. So because of that, we are working town by town and educating cities and towns across Connecticut, and 10 cities and towns have so far passed local ordinances that ban fracking waste.
And I'm guessing there are probably about another 10 or so where citizens are starting to work.
There are. We're kind of in a snowball phase right now where towns are finding out about other towns' successes, and commissioners and Board of Selectmen and council members are, their interest is piqued, and citizens are forming action groups to bring it forward. And that's part of why I'm here today in New London, because there's an active group here apparently that wants to move forward.
There is a group, Dagmar in Willimantic held a meeting back maybe in early December, and there were a couple New Londoners who were there, and they came back and they were interested. Mm-hmm. And I noticed Middletown was one of the more recent towns to pass it just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And there was a write-up on the Connecticut Council of Municipalities newsletter, mm-hmm. An article from the Middletown newspaper about the passage of the fracking ban, and they had also attached to their report a little article about the carcinogenic and other health problems caused by the waste, mm-hmm. which makes me think that the CCM is seeing this as something that could be a good thing.
You know, we'll see how movement moves forward with the CCM. The interesting thing is that the current president of the CCM is Select Woman Susan Bransfield of Portland, and Portland passed the exact same ordinance as far as the prohibitions and definitions that Middletown did just earlier this month.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so, and also on the board of the CCM is a town manager from Coventry, and Coventry was one of the first towns in Connecticut to pass this ban. So far, 10 local bans have passed in Connecticut. They are covering, let me see if I can get it straight, I've been putting it through so often, Andover, Ashford, Coventry, Branford, Mansfield, Middletown, Wyndham, which also includes the city of Willimantic,
Right.
Washington, Windsor, and I'm missing one. I just missed one. I'm sorry about that. There's 10 that have passed.
Did you count Portland in that list?
Maybe I didn't list Portland in that list. And you're right, I didn't list Portland in that list. And because of this, there's been so much interest that has just started to generate, especially when larger communities like Windham and with the city of Willimantic and the city of Middletown passing, and major suburban towns like Brantford and Windsor, not just smaller rural communities.
Of course, with 169 towns in our small state, it's a long slog to get to everyone.
It is a long slog, but I think once you kind of reach not necessarily a tipping point, but once you reach a certain amount that have been passed, then you can go before CCM, or you could go to the small municipality governments and say, look, this is something that your towns, your municipalities really need. It's strongly supported by both government and citizenry
Right.
in these towns. I mean, it's just, we've had an absolute landslide of success in getting these ordinances passed. The meeting that Dagmar held in beginning of December was in Willimantic. They brought together groups from all across eastern Connecticut, including some people here from New London. And the presentation that I have in slides, I can show you what people were presented, and then they did some brainstorming and set up plans on how they can move forward.
So I guess a fundamental question, and this might lead you right into your slides. So what is the problem with this waste that we want to keep it out?
Well, there's two problems. There's massive volumes of it, and it's highly toxic, both with the chemicals that they use and natural toxins that are coming out of the ground where they're digging these wells. And with natural toxins, we're talking about heavy metals. There's a long list of just very contaminated materials that are buried 2 miles deep that humans should not have any immediate contact with. And unfortunately, when we're drilling all these wells and extracting the waste that comes back up to the top of the wells, these natural contaminants come with it. And we're talking about arsenic and lead and strontium and barium and hexavalent chromium. Most people had never heard of that chemical before the movie Erin Brockovich. And then there's naturally occurring radioactive materials. And the shale that's underneath Pennsylvania, the Marcellus Shale, where they're currently fracking, is known by geologists as one of the most radioactive shale in the nation. Wow. And in fact, a couple decades ago, Pennsylvania was being eyed by the uranium industry as a possible place where they could start mining for uranium. But what they found out was that the uranium deposits are so scattered and spread out. They're like, tiny little, crystals kind of all over the place.
So it wasn't economically feasible.
It wasn't feasible for uranium mining, but they've got all this shale, and they've figured out a way to get the gas out through this high volume horizontal fracturing. And unfortunately, all those pockets of radioactive materials are now contaminating the waste that's coming up to the surface. So it's a big problem. It's a big problem. We're currently fracking in 30 states across the nation, and we're seeing serious contamination problems.
And Connecticut doesn't seem to have the potential to be a site for fracking, but
not at this point in time. Connecticut does have a shale deposit. It's called the Hartford Basin, but the way Connecticut was formed and the geology of the region, it's not a nice, thick, heavy seam of shale that you can spend $1 million building a drill site and then go in and be able to harvest a lot of gas out of it. So I think there are other more lucrative locations that will be mined long before Connecticut gets its sites turned to.
But our problem is, of course, that although we're a small state,
Yeah.
we're the way you get from New York to New England or
Yeah.
Pennsylvania to New England.
Yeah, well, the biggest problem is that where this high volume fracturing is occurring, so much waste is being produced that the state where the drilling is taking place cannot handle all of the waste. And the drillers in Pennsylvania are currently shipping out their waste to at least 8 other states. And there are ideas of bringing this waste here to Connecticut. Most likely it would come by tanker truck on the highways, and it would be going to hazardous waste treatment facilities first. The 3 hazardous waste treatment facilities we have in Connecticut right now are all for-profit and they're privately owned. And Riverkeeper Alliance, Rivers Alliance here in Connecticut has looked at the EPA echo records of those 3 facilities, and it's not good news when you look at how often they've been non-compliant and how often they've had very significant violations. People can go to the Rivers Alliance website and just click on priority topics and hazardous waste and go and view these records. And I think the facility with the best record has been non-compliant 9 of the past 12 quarters. That means most of the past 3 years. And the facility with the worst record has been non-compliant for all of the last 3 years, in addition to 2 of them having significant violations. And a violation is when they are discharging waste that hasn't met the standards to which they're supposed to have been treated it to. And once it's discharged, the problem is out there. And the radioactivity in fracking waste is most commonly what's found is radium-226 and radium-228. And radium-226 has a half-life of 1,600 years.
So it's not going away.
It's not going away. It never goes away. And it's going to take 4,000 years for it to decompose and no longer be radioactive. And as it decays, it turns into other radioactive materials that are radioactive for potentially hundreds of years. We're talking about polonium and lead. And then the final end stage of the decay process is it turns into lead. So,
yes, which has its uses. It's not
highly
radioactive,
toxic
but
material all the way through.
Yeah. There are real health implications there.
Right.
So even if these facilities could make a profit taking this stuff, who knows what the cost is in terms of public health?
Exactly. And we're seeing alarming reports coming out of other states where fracking has been taking place for the past 5 to 10 years in this high volume method. We're seeing a lot of incidences of contamination, whether it be accidents or spills or illegal dumping or treatment facilities that didn't properly treat the waste and then they discharged into waterways. We've seen drinking water been contaminated, whether it's surface water that's being taken out of a river or whether it's an aquifer that's been contaminated because spills have leached down through the soil and have contaminated these aquifers. Yale just did a study last year and they looked at some spill sites in Pennsylvania, and they found that 5 years after the spill, these aquifers are still showing trace levels of contamination.
Wow. And they cover a lot of ground, many of the aquifers.
Yep.
It isn't like a reservoir that's maybe a couple miles across.
Right. We recently passed an ordinance in Windsor, and one of the council members made an interesting comment. He said, I've looked at the maps of the aquifers that service my property, and he said they extend as far north as the Massachusetts border. And so if you have a spill, it might not necessarily be in your town, but that doesn't mean it's not going to impact you. It could be further down the road, whether it be aquifer contamination or runoff. Certainly anything that's discharged into a river where the treatment facilities are, the runoff will ultimately end up in the Long Island Sound.
And there is a lot of sensitivity right now about the health of the Long Island Sound and stormwater runoff, even without worrying about the potential of radioactive waste as well.
Exactly. One of the sites that was examined by Duke researchers in Pennsylvania downstream of a wastewater treatment facility found that the sediment was so contaminated that it would be considered a toxic waste site if it was an industrial dumping site. So how do you clean that up? You're talking about sediment in a waterway. And as soon as you start to disturb it, it's going to move. Do you block off the river completely and dredge the riverbed? I mean, if there's a flood, you're talking about sediment filtering out and flooding out into the surrounding area, and then you've got leftover radioactive dust that's contaminating things. How do you possibly clean any of that up?
And I think about our area, the Thames River is kept dredged up to the subbase.
Right.
And it already, there are probably concerns about what to do with what's dredged.
Right.
And this could just make it a little even more worrisome than it is.
Yeah, and think about the problems we've had with storm surges too, with either tropical storms or hurricanes or nor'easters or whatever it happens to be. So it is a concern. We don't want to contaminate our waterways. We don't want to have accidents. We don't want first responders having to be exposed to these when accidents do occur. And we certainly don't want communities to be impacted.
Wow. Well, I did watch part of your presentation in Windsor, but I think it would be useful to go through it because I think viewers have, very varied amounts of knowledge about the subject.
Yeah, and you can talk about it and people's eyes kind of glaze over, but when you show them a picture, it's worth 1,000 words. So I'll move on to this first slide. This is just a typical example of a drilling site in Pennsylvania. Here you see there's a temporary waste pit where the waste is coming out and being stored in what's basically a man-made little swimming pool that's lined with like a rubber or plastic sheeting. There's a very large containment pond because that holds water that's going to be mixed with chemicals and sand and injected into the wells. And on average, each well gets injected with about 5 million gallons of this toxic chemical solution. But there are about 8 different types of waste that are classified at these wells. Not only do you have what gets injected, but when you first start drilling the well, they use chemicals that are just as toxic in the drilling stage as they do when they inject the well. So these muds that come back up to the surface are part of the waste product. Then you've got drill cuttings, which is the actual solid material that's being drilled out of the ground when they're creating that shaft that goes down into the ground.
What's the diameter of a shaft?
It could be 8 inches, it could be 10, 12, it's really, they're going to put a pipe in. So the shaft is usually a little bit bigger, and then the pipe that fits down in is a smaller diameter.
So if you're going those depths, that can be quite a lot of solid material you're going through.
We'll get to another slide that shows the amount of waste. And I don't have a picture of the actual waste sand, but this is what it looks like where it's being strip mined in Wisconsin. And we're doing so much fracking across the country, and this special type of quartz or silica sand, a lot of it's coming out of Wisconsin, and the amount of area that they're using to either strip mine it or process it is almost equal to 3 times the size of Connecticut. So it's not only the drilling and the waste, but it's also the mining of materials to develop the silica for injection. And once again, here you see an example of the flowback waste that comes up to the surface. You can see here very easily how a leak or a seepage could occur with it leaching through the ground. This is a very rural area. I'd bet a lot of money that house in the background is on well water and not on piped water coming from a municipal source. And then there's something called produced water or brine. And the shale that we're talking about that's being drilled is about 1 mile deep, up to 2 miles deep as well. And it used to be an ancient seabed. So 350 million years ago, it wasn't compressed rock buried deep in the ground. It was a shallow seabed. It was, what we can look out and see in New London. And this has now become buried and compressed, and not only have all the plant and animal material been compressed into fossil fuels, but the ancient seawater is still compressed and exists in the layers of the rock. So when you blow up the rock underground, when you fracture it and release the gas, you're also releasing all this ancient seawater. And that's called produced water or brine. And when the gas first comes out of the well, it looks nothing like you might be familiar with if you turn on your stove or see a propane fire. It has this very kind of wet consistency. And they have to separate this brine out of the gas before they can send the gas off and refine it and finish it off to send it to for use. But because this ancient seawater has been brewing next to all these radium and uranium and arsenic and lead deposits for millions of years, it is also contaminated with this material. So that's how these naturally occurring toxins are coming to the surface. And this is an example of statistics that were pulled directly from the Pennsylvania DEP website. This organization named Frac Tracker Alliance helps to study the figures and then puts together articles. And this is just for the first 6 months of 2015, and you can see that 20 million barrels of waste was reported in the state of Pennsylvania just for the first 6 months, and a barrel is 42 gallons. So here you are, we're talking about 878 million gallons of liquid. And here's another slide that shows where this waste is going. And where I've marked it with a red star, those 13.8 million barrels, times it by 42, and you get close to 600 million gallons. All we know about this waste is that it's being reused. Pennsylvania doesn't track where it's being reused, where it's being sent, how many times it's being reused. We just know it's being reused.
Okay, what are the possible ways that this is reused?
Most likely it is being injected back down into another well. As the industry says, well, we recycle X percent of all the water that we use. But unfortunately, as you reuse it over and over again, it becomes more and more contaminated to the point where you just have to stop reusing it. And then it gets shipped somewhere for disposal. And that's where Connecticut comes in, and I'll get back to that a little bit later. So you asked, why is this stuff hazardous? Well, we know some of the chemicals that are being used. Here's an example from a congressional study that was done back in 2011. And this small sample of more than 750 chemicals are what we know are hazardous air pollutants, or they're regulated under the Safe Drinking Water Act. But the oil and gas industry has some heavy-hitting lobbyists at in Washington, D.C., and they have been able to be exempted from portions of pretty much every major federal Environmental Protection Act that's ever been passed. So even though other industries can't inject this type of chemical into the ground, the oil and gas industry is allowed to.
So as many lobbyists as many of the other industries have, and we know, I've heard that in Connecticut, every business association, has its own lobbyists, but the oil and gas industry just kind of trumps everything.
Well, they are pretty much the most lucrative industry at work, influencing our politicians. And this particular slide is just this little infographic that was put together by Physicians for Responsibility, for Social Responsibility in Los Angeles. And another study that was released in 2011, this endocrinologist, Dr. Theo Colburn, looked up all the chemicals. She came up with a list of about 700 chemicals, I believe. And she looked them all up to see what their impact was on the human body. And what she reported is shown here in this little diagram. And where you see blue, those are chemicals that are soluble in water. So if they spill, they can run off or seep down through the ground and infiltrate aquifers. And where you see red, volatile, basically means it can vaporize. So these chemicals can travel through the air, and then you can be affected by them by either inhaling them or ingesting them if they settle onto things that you're going to eat, or they can settle on your skin and travel through your skin as well. So you can see that there are quite a lot of body systems that can be very negatively impacted. And studies are starting to come out now that show us some of the problems that people are experiencing where their drilling is occurring. Yale's done quite a few. I mentioned one a little bit earlier about contaminated aquifers. They've also studied which chemicals affect developmental and reproductive health. They've studied which ones are causing cancer. UPenn and Columbia did a combined medical study where they looked at the hospitalizations of people living in 3 counties right next to each other in Pennsylvania. 2 of them are very heavily drilled. One of them is not drilled at all because a moratorium was put in place, because that's the drinking water supply for the Delaware River Basin in New York City and other communities. And what they found was in the counties where they're having heavy drilling, people are showing up at the hospital with statistically more problems with cardiac problems, neurological problems, skin problems, problems with premature birth or low birth weight, kidney problems, and the oncology departments where they deal with cancers. So we know what the chemicals do to the human body. We know that they affect all these types of body systems and can cause these diseases. And now we're seeing people who are living near all this waste and all this drilling activity are going to the hospital at a much more significant, frequent rate with these same types of illnesses.
So we're actually seeing in a practical way how this is affecting people.
Yeah, you don't have to, connect the dots very far. And, our concern is if tanker trucks start showing up by the hundreds and thousands in Connecticut to bring this waste here, that there will ultimately be exposure for Connecticut residents as well.
Well, quite a bit that you said is volatile, whether the trucks are sealed well enough to keep any of the volatile substances out of the air, you don't know. And there have been spills and accidents as well. Our highways aren't.
And also when there's transfer from a truck to a facility, or transfer to a storage facility. It's highly unlikely that the trucks will just be able to show up and release their load and then turn around and go, especially if high volumes are coming. So there will most likely need to be some sort of temporary storage facility in between. And, it's all being transferred around by hoses, and, valves can be leaky. There can be all sorts of problems. So. But these are just a sample of 5 studies. A really easy way for people to see so many of the risks and hazards of fracking is look at the compendium that's been put together by Concerned Health Professionals of New York. And at the bottom right hand of the screen, you'll see, just Google compendium fracking. You can also add in Concerned Health Professionals. And what they've done is looked at the more than 750 studies and reports that have come out in recent years. And they've summarized all of these scientific reports and journalistic reports and governmental reports. And they've included just a paragraph of very easy to read language that summarizes all of these studies. And be prepared to be shocked. It's amazing that our politicians are just turning a blind eye when you can see all the problems that are occurring. Wow. And as I mentioned before, the radioactivity, this report, I've just put the cover page on. You can go to the Grassroots Environmental Education website. It's a real powerhouse group located right across the Sound in Long Island. And this report was done by the senior scientist of the National Council of Radiation Protection. And what Dr. White shows us is why this material is so radioactive. If you look on the left side, conventional or vertical drilling basically just came straight down into the shale seam, and it really only impacted a very small amount of the rock. So if it made a direct hit into a uranium or a radium or an arsenic deposit or a lead deposit, what's going to come up to the surface will be contaminated with those toxins. But now the high volume horizontal fracturing moves through such a large quantity of rock that the amount of contaminants that it's easy to pick up that will come back up to the surface.
You can just see the surface area.
The surface area is enormous, and this isn't to scale. In some of the seams, depending on how thick they are, drillers are able to go down a mile deep and then turn horizontally and go up to 2 miles through the shale, and that's why it's become high volume horizontal fracturing. They have to travel such a far distance and use so much more solution to break open the rock. What they're doing is they're injecting these wells at super high pressure, and the liquids going down there with sand and the chemicals, and it's just shattering the rock underground. And because they're traveling so far, they have to use a very high volume of liquid, and then that maximizes how much waste comes back up to the surface. And as far as the radioactivity is concerned, this diagram shows how the human body can be impacted as it moves through the air. You could be directly impacted by radiation. Through the air, radioactive material can deposit on crops, and then we eat the crops. It could deposit on soil and plant matter, and then animals can inhale it or ingest it. And then that goes into their meat or their milk, and then we ingest it. Remember, the radioactive half-life is 1,600 years. So if there's a spill near a cornfield, that corn crop can take up the radiation and the radioactivity, the radioactive material, and if that corn is fed to a cow and then you eat the hamburger from that cow.
Yeah, and the toxins tend to get concentrated the further up you go on the food chain.
So, this is just one example about how humans are impacted. And then also when the radioactive material can travel through the soil and be impacting surface or groundwater, again, similar ways. So you can either ingest it or inhale it. In here you see at the top where it says fish and sports gear. Imagine a fisherman who's standing in a creek which has radioactive sediment in it, or somebody who's working along the shoreline in an area that discharge from inadequately treated waste has impacted the shoreline area. If you have a blister on your finger, or if you have a cut or any type of open skin, if you get contaminated water or sediment into that open area, the radioactive isotopes can make it inside your body. So, and what type of radioactivity are we looking at? Well, this particular slide, all those little dots are data points of different wells that were tested. What you're seeing here is how radioactive the brine coming out of these wells can be. And I've put a red arrow that points to 5 picocuries per liter. A picocurie is just a funny name for a measurement. It's named after Madame Curie, who discovered radium, and as a result died from radium poisoning after handling it in her lab. And the EPA determines that 5 picocuries per liter is considered safe if it's drinking water. It's kind of an arbitrary number, because if there's just one radioactive isotope in that source of drinking water and it stays inside your body, you're going to start having DNA mutations and could potentially lead to some serious health problems. But anyways, going back to the slide, you can see all these different studies and all these different samples that were taken. The waste coming out of these wells varies, and I believe the very top figure on this slide is 26,000 picocuries per liter.
So even if the 5 picocuries is kind of an arbitrary number, what we're talking about coming out of the wells is like orders of magnitude greater than that.
It is. And remember, it has a half-life of 1,600 years. So it can accumulate. So if you continue, let's say you can clean waste and you discharge it repeatedly over and over and over again at the same source point, you might have only let out maybe 1%, but over time, as you continuously discharge that effluent at that site, you're going to run into a much bigger problem. So, and it also bioaccumulates, as we talked previously. And here's an example of some of the storage that's taking place, the tanker trucks that are going back and forth. This is a farmer's field that at one point was verdant and productive, and I can guarantee you that the neighbors living in this rural area never in their wildest dreams imagined that they would have hundreds of tanker trucks going past their house in a day, delivering to storage facilities like this. And you can see thief hatches at the top of the tanks that are popped open. If there's too much pressure or vapor that builds up in the tanks, there's going to be an automatic release. And again, those chemicals and radioactive materials can travel through the air.
And the sheer volume is just mind-boggling.
It's mind-boggling. And the figures that I showed you were just one state for 6 months of the year. Pennsylvania has had years where they've produced more than 1 billion gallons of liquid waste. It varies based on how active they are in drilling, but and here's an example of the truck accidents. You put thousands more tanker trucks on the road, statistically speaking, you're just going to have more accidents on the road, and that's what we're already seeing. And remember we talked about how the chemicals can travel through the air. Well, here you've got a first responder with a push broom and no protective gear over his face. I mean, other people standing nearby, no protective gear. Here in Connecticut, Connecticut's the only state in the nation, because of this temporary moratorium that passed, that does designate this waste as hazardous waste. So
you wouldn't see a picture like that. You'd see someone in a hazmat suit.
Probably, depending on what type of responder gets there first. So are all the first responders in towns where accidents could take place in Connecticut going to be equipped with hazmat suits? Are you going to have, volunteer fire department men and women and police officers that get there first before DEEP shows up?
And who's going to pay for this?
Yeah.
Because really, the taxpayers also want to know if there's a lot of money in this business, well, who's going to foot the bill when something goes wrong?
And that's one of the concerns, because right now towns are very concerned about the promises the state has made for whatever project is happening, and they're concerned with the budget cuts that money won't be forthcoming. So it is a huge concern. Here's an example of a very large spill that happened in Canada, where the wastewater was being piped from one location to the next, and you can just see, over 100 acres of trees and plants and whatever animals were there at the time were just wiped out. And this was a pipeline that was only 5 years old. We're not talking about something that was, old and decrepit.
So it shouldn't be an aging infrastructure.
Right.
Maybe it is.
And this particular slide is important for the state of Connecticut because, as I mentioned, we have a clause in the current moratorium that says any of this waste that comes into Connecticut is deemed hazardous waste, so it would go to a treatment facility. This particular picture I took off of the website of Eureka Resources, which is one of the most state-of-the-art types of treatment facilities. They actually don't get very much waste because it's so expensive to treat it this way. And if Connecticut starts treating it, this type of specialized treatment would, have to be built, most likely at the treatment facilities here in Connecticut. And It's kind of hard to see in this slide when you don't have your computer, but where the long red arrow is pointing, there's a valve that's just gushing liquid, and the bucket is overflowing, and you can see all this pooling on the ground. Obviously, this particular truck is having a problem unloading their waste. Here's another particular picture. The same facility taken at a completely different time of day and of year. And again, you're seeing what appears to be runoff and dripping and leaking, and just the tire traffic moving through these neighborhoods, bringing this waste, is spewing any kind of toxins that the wheels are picking up, just the friction of the tires on the roads. So, and that would be a problem with a spill too. If there's a spill that's not adequately cleaned up, subsequent cars that come along on a roadway, or just the friction of the tires are just gonna, thousands of years of radioactive material potentially could be traveling through the air every time a bicycle or a car travels through. So. And this particular map shows locally where disposal is happening around Pennsylvania. I mentioned that they're sending out their waste to about 8 different states, and all the yellow flags are various disposal sites, whether they're treatment facilities or solid waste facilities. And the 3 red arrows point to where in Connecticut we have the facilities: Bristol, Meriden, and Bridgeport. Most likely, Route 84 would be a prime travel route. I don't know if 91 or 95 or 95 will be utilized to get to Bridgeport or not, or whether they'll take some sort of connector from 84 down to get to Bridgeport, if that facility decides to apply for a permit. And here's a pretty lengthy list of the potential types of disposal and risks of contamination that can happen. As you're driving it along, you can have accidents. When you're transferring it from the truck to another facility or storage, you can also have leaks and spills. Once the hazardous waste treatment facilities treat it initially, they're going to have a very concentrated residual that they're going to have to get rid of. Most likely they'll be putting it either back in trucks and shipping it out of the state, or possibly even railroad cars. We noted one of the facilities is very close to a rail yard, and there's tracks that run right past. So it's possible that residuals go onto a rail line. But that residual waste is highly, highly concentrated, and it's going to need to be disposed of outside of Connecticut. So again, we have the risk of it moving on our roadways. And then there's going to be a lot of leftover water, which is called effluent. And we don't know what DEEP is planning to do as far as their procedures with this effluent. They could be shipping it out to treatment facilities that are located all around the state that can take this partially treated effluent. And if any of these hazardous waste facilities don't adequately clean it before they send their effluent along, then that effluent becomes a source of contamination potentially as well, because none of these treatment facilities can further clean out the chemicals or radioactive materials that could slip through. They discharge directly into waterways locally. They also have to send their sludge to incinerators, these trash to energy burn facilities.
And we have a couple of those here.
And there's potential for emissions coming out that could be radioactive, and we know definitely for sure that burning this stuff up at 2,000 degrees or wherever how hot they burn it in these incinerators does absolutely nothing to dissipate the radioactivity. So the ash that they have to clean out of the trash to energy facilities will still be radioactive if contaminated sludge is sent there. So that also becomes a risk for local towns, because if it's determined that their facility has become contaminated or their sludge is contaminated, they're going to have to find a much more expensive means to get rid of their local sludge. And then we're talking about byproducts as well. Not only is this waste being treated and disposed of, but it's also being turned into other products. beneficial reuse or beneficial use determination permits or BUD permits. An example of what we do already in Connecticut is if you have to replace your roof, all those asphalt shingles, instead of sending them to the landfill and filling up the landfill, they all get crushed up and used for construction fill, whether it's a project that the Department of Transportation is doing, or maybe base material when they're repairing a road or a bridge or something like that. Well, unfortunately, the solid wastes and the liquid wastes are getting permits to be used in a similar fashion. And the solid wastes, you can see the examples of how they're being used in a very short list of states. And in some states, the liquid brine is being sprayed as a de-icer, because remember, it's ancient seawater. It's very, very salty. It's 8 times saltier than regular seawater of today. And the risk of contamination is just so high. So this is a map that shows how states have been responding to all this waste that's been coming out of Pennsylvania. Where you see all the tiny little red and pink and yellow dots, those are individual municipalities in New York State that passed either fracking bans or a combination of fracking and fracking waste bans. And so many of them started getting active, I think about 200 of them on the map, that then the counties in New York got active. And so far, 15 to 17 counties have passed specific rules on how to deal with waste, and 15 of them have banned this fracking waste in their counties. And these are specific bans just for the waste on the county level. It has nothing to do with the state making a decision in New York not to engage in high volume fracturing. It's specifically for the waste. And so you also see the state of Vermont has a complete ban on the waste and fracturing as well. And here in Connecticut, we're starting to play catch up. And unfortunately, this map is not completely up to date. We had 2 towns, Windsor and Middletown, that passed very strict ordinances on January 3rd. So I need to update it. And but as you can see, there's a lot of interest being generated. There's a lot of activity across the state, and we're just going to keep pushing through. And here's an example of what it looked like in Coventry. Coventry is a very rural town. I think they have maybe 8,000 registered voters, 9,000 maybe. I can't remember exactly, but it's a small community population-wise. And they turned out more than 90 people at their town vote. Coventry went a very special petitioning route. That's how they had it written in their charter, that they're allowed to petition their town council and get an ordinance passed by petition. And so this was the special town meeting where the voters got to show up and vote this in. And next slide is Andover. Andover also did this petition route, and this was really special. They had standing room only in the room that night. You can see there's a crowd coming in the door, kind of on the back of the building. There were even more people crowding the room by the time they voted, and every single person in the room voted yes.
So it was a unanimous vote.
And it was loud and resounding, and it was just so impressive, so impressive. And this is what we're seeing over and over and over again.
Now we're finding, we only have about 5 minutes left.
No, 3.
Oh, 3 minutes left. So we're going to give up the laptop, and we'll talk just a little bit about what it might look like in New London.
How do I turn off this slide
Oh.
for you?
He's got to get off this slide. Just tell Chris to get off.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay, now we're ready to
There we
have
go.
our last 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay.
So New London looks quite different, though. I think we looked at the charter in New London, and I know people can watch this show who live in Waterford and East Lyme and Montville and north of Norwich a bit, so I hope that they will also be interested. But in New London, actually, any citizen can bring a proposal to City Council and ask that they vote on it. And of course, you have to get on the agenda and do your homework and, be able to speak to it at the meeting. But it is a council vote, so it's a matter of people talking to our 7 city councilors and, our mayor and other civic leaders if we were to want to do this.
Yep, well, it starts with education, because I'm sure a lot of the council members and your mayor haven't seen this type of information before. Most people are pretty surprised by it. And but what we found is once people are in the know, they're smart enough to say, we don't want this in our community. And they're not going to turn a blind eye to it. So there have been Board of Selectmen and councils across Connecticut that have championed passing this. And Windsor was a perfect example. They voted unanimously 9-0 just a couple weeks ago on January 3rd. And it was the Republican minority leader who championed this and brought it forward and talked to all the council members and really set the stage. And I came in and gave a 20-minute presentation, and we had some Q&A, and people educated themselves more, and a couple weeks later they voted with overwhelming bipartisan support. And the same thing happened in Branford as well. There was a Democrat minority leader who brought it forward, and enough citizens stepped forward and told their RTM, the representative town meeting members, that they wanted to pass this. And they have about 30 people on their RTM and 11 Republicans, and all of the Democrats voted for it, and it passed with flying colors. So
now Connecticut, has 169 towns and 10 down and 159 to go, some in process. Are there any particular regions where it's most important that this be addressed, or is it really important to get all 169 towns to buy into it?
I think it's important for every town to protect itself, because what you don't want is either materials that the town purchases for projects or materials that private contractors bring in for construction to be brought into your community and cause contamination. Greenwich is a perfect example. Within the past couple of years, they've spent millions of dollars ripping up their town sports fields around their schools, especially around the high school, because when they were built a couple decades ago, they accepted, unknown to them, contaminated material, and they found out a couple years ago that it was contaminated with PCBs. And so that's the type of remediation costs we're talking about.
And I wouldn't be surprised if other towns had that. So I think we're out of time. People can get more information at Food and Water Watch. Anyone who's watching can get in touch with us, and we will get information to your town. But I think people from about 7 or 8 towns can watch this, so
Yeah.
hopefully they'll all get started.
And we will help and support anybody who wants to be active.
Well, thank you, Jen, for coming down here.
Thanks, Ronna.
We'll talk to you next week.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
twimbe